I just wanted to sit down and do a casual, chatty, chill video today, just kind of reflecting on reading in 2023. It was a big year for me. I read a lot of books, joined a book club with a few of my online besties. I started posting on YouTube. It was very eventful, productive, really fun. I enjoyed it. So I wanted to just reflect a little bit on my reading in 2023 and look ahead to some of my goals for 2024. I know that this time can be very stressful for people who maybe be comparing themselves to others. I know I've seen a lot on social media recently, kind of the discourse just about setting reading goals, people kind of falling out of love with reading because they put so much pressure on themselves. I want to read the classics and I want to read 1,000-page books and all these things, but it's really just about what you want to do. And reading is just supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fulfilling for you. While I will set a reading goal for the year, I think it's something great if I meet the goal, but if I don't read X amount of books in a year, that's fine. I'm not going to read short books that I don't like. I'm not going to listen to audiobooks that I don't retain just to meet a goal. You can do whatever you want, to each their own, but I just want to preface that by a goal should just be something you aspire to, something that makes sense for you. Everyone's different. Everyone has different schedules, different reading styles, reads at a different pace. So do what's right for you, but I want to talk about some of the things that I did in 2023 and set some goals for 2024. I did not meet my reading goal for 2023, which was, I think, the second year in a row that I didn't meet it, which was 50 books. But that's not changing. I'm doing 50 books again. I think actually last year my goal was 55 and I read 47 books, which I'm still incredibly proud of. Doesn't bother me. I think reading 47 is still great. So this year we're hoping for 50. If not, that's fine. So I'm basically just gonna pull up my Goodreads and just see if we can find any fun little stats to chat about. I have book related things in a Notion board. It's very handy. I highly recommend it if you're someone who struggles to plan and write things out or journal physically. So for 2023 stats, like I said, I read 47 books and about half of those were fantasy. I'm totally okay with that. A lot of them are romantic fantasy. I do enjoy that. Some of them were a little more historical, epic fantasy, things like Divine Rivals and Babel, which are a little more historical fiction. But overall, fantasy was my most read genre, will probably continue to be my most read genre. Other than fantasy, my most read genres were generally literary fiction or some kind of historical fiction. I read a handful, I would say about 5, just straight romance, no fantasy. Straight, no chaser. Which are not my favorite. So about 5 sounds about right. I read kind of a dark, spicy fantasy series, the Raven Hood series. I read Hooked, which was kind of a fantasy dark romance. I read a gay romance for my book club, and then I read a Christmas romance. So not really my thing, but every once in a while I do read them. Next month for February, I do want to read a few more romances. Find that sweet spot for me because I love a slow burn. I do enjoy romance, but it can't be too contemporary, cutesy, cheesy for me. It has to have a little more depth. It has to have a little more fun, spice, something to carry it through. I read a handful of sci-fi's, classics, and thrillers. I would say like maybe 2 of each. If we're looking at my average for 2023 rating wise, I'm pretty happy with this. My average rating was a 3.9. I only had a few duds and those were kind of in the beginning of the year. Specifically, I think Red Queen and Atlas Paradox were some fantasies that were a 2-star for me and I won't be continuing those series. But after that, I averaged either 3 to 5 stars for most of my reads. I do my research and I'm kind of picky about the books I decide to read because I only average maybe 3 to 5 books a month. So I like it to be something that I genuinely think I'm gonna like. My average book length was 400 pages, which is long. And I would like to say that maybe I can pick up some shorter books to meet that goal. But to be honest, I'd rather just read the things that I know I like to read and fantasies just tend to be longer. So I'd rather read what I know I like, even if that means that I'm reading less books in the year, because the number doesn't really matter to me. Going through my favorite books, I noticed that I would say 75% of the books I read were Kindle reads from my library through Libby. Out of all the books that I bought in 2023, most of them were thrifted, and I would like to keep that going. There are a few physical books I would like to purchase this year to treat myself. Ones that I have read and that I like, ones I want to add to my collection, specifically Bunny, I would like to own physically and put on my bookshelf. Both of the Blake Crouch books I've read recently, Dark Matter and Recursion, I'd like to add those to my collection as well. Babel. But overall, I would just like to continue to be very specific and intentional about the books that I'm buying. I do that already. I do have a full bookshelf, but this is books that I've been collecting over the last 15 years. This is not a massive resurgence for me of buying a bunch of books, but I have really enjoyed thrifting this year and finding a lot of good gems at my Goodwill. Bless the person who donates to my Goodwill. They deserve everything because I find so many good, a lot of popular books at my Goodwill, a lot of book of the month books I see, a lot of hardcover book of the months, a lot of just popular literary fictions and fantasies. I find a ton of Lord of the Rings editions at my Goodwill. So I think of all the books that I bought in 2023, I bought probably the most Lord of the Rings editions to add to my collection. I did one reread of a series, which was ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses. This year, I think I'm going to try and reread Throne of Glass, but I haven't done it yet. I haven't started. I meant to do that last year and honestly haven't got to it yet, so we'll see if that happens. But rereads don't happen very often for me, and I think I'll probably keep it that way. Also, something notable for last year, I annotated my first ever book. A Picture of Dorian Gray was one of the classics that I read this year, and this was my first ever time annotating a book. I really enjoyed it. It was not intentional, but I started reading this, and let's see, 64 pages in on chapter 5, I started annotating this because I was noticing so many things that were so good and that I wanted to mark. So that was my first experience. It was really fun. You can see I have the color-coded tabs. I even was like physically writing in it, underlining, things like that. So that was my first ever time doing that. And that leads me into some of my 2024 goals. One of them being I would like to start annotating either my favorites, like my rereads. So like if I do a Throne of Glass reread, I want to annotate that, and classics. So something like this, I feel like is worth marking up, tabbing, because I'm a nerd and I kind of like the aspect of feeling like I'm in school. I know that might seem crazy, but I do enjoy doing that with the classics. So I want to read at least 2. I'd like to read a few more classics and annotate them. I don't want to try and do it with every book. I know for a fact I won't keep up with it, so we'll keep it for a handful of like the special ones. As I mentioned, I probably read about 50% fantasy, and I only read a handful of sci-fis last year, and I forgot how much I love a sci-fi. In 2024, I would like to get to some more sci-fis. Specifically right now, I'm actually reading Red Rising on my Kindle, really liking it. I'm only about 15 or 20% of the way through, but just as usual, kind of dip my toe into a little more of the different genres that I know now that I like. Sci-fi, some more literary fiction, some more classics, historical fictions as well. I know my tried and true, I will definitely be reading a lot of fantasy series. I have a long list of fantasy series I want to start, which I mentioned in my 5 fantasy series I want to read video. I will link that down below if you want to check that one out. My overall book goal, as I mentioned, is 50 books, but more specifically, I would like to make that as a 1 book a week challenge. Obviously equates to about 52 books. I think that will help me meet the goal, and I think that's very doable, and that kind of aligns with my Libby library loans as well, because those are usually a 2-week loan. And I think that will help just keep me on track. I would also like to track my reading physically in a book journal. This one, again, I got from my Goodwill. Someone there is a saint. This was completely untouched, never been written in. So I got this for $2 at my Goodwill. It's just a Barnes & Noble, one of those pre-printed journals that just has, you know, list of books read, and then you can write the title, your rating, a little review. I'd like to have something physically, not looking at a screen constantly. I tend to use just Goodreads, and I only write reviews for, I would say, probably 50% of the books that I read, but I am someone who works in editorial and writing, so I feel like I want to physically write out, but also on my Goodreads, at least sit down and think about it and write a somewhat thought out review for my books on Goodreads. Instead of just giving them a star rating, I'd like to at least write a paragraph or two of my thoughts. I also don't have the best memory, so I think that actually writing something about it when it's fresh in my mind will help me a lot, not just with things like YouTube and content creation, but just my memories of the reading experience in general. I would like to be a little bit better about documenting it. My last goal for the year is that I want to finish archiving all of my books in my Notion page. I have a huge database. I only probably have about 30% of these logged in there right now. I'm seeing a lot of people recently, especially for Christmas, getting that book scanner tool. I'm against like buying gadgets and just kind of accumulating stuff. So I'm just gonna use my Notion. I already have it set up, but I would like to go through my bookshelves and log all the books that I have in there so I have a record, especially for when I'm out thrifting. I don't always remember what books I have already, especially with the ones that I collect. Like I mentioned, the Lord of the Rings editions, series that are unfinished, like these Game of Thrones I have the first 2. Having them logged with the edition, the author, things like that, that's just gonna be something that I'm gonna have to sit down and do and keep up with it. That's the other part. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not worth it if you're not actually using it and keeping up with it. So those are all of my goals I want to try and work on in 2024 as far as my reading goes. Obviously, as far as YouTube and content creation, I want to stay on a schedule and do 1 book video per week, just for myself as well, to do like a monthly wrap up, talk about the books while they're fresh in my mind, something that's been important to me and I've been enjoying doing it. So continue posting about books so that I can engage with more people, meet with more people, and talk about them, because if there's anything I love to do, it's talk and talk about books. So if you have any reading goals for this year, whether it's how many books you want to read, what genres you want to try, an author you want to try for the first time, please leave a comment. I would love to know. You can follow me on Goodreads, socials, all of that stuff. Thank you so much for being here. Please subscribe if you haven't. I'm very close to 100 subscribers, which is really exciting to me. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.